Hello, everybody. This is David Friedman with my co-host Dave Burkus on TCA Crossroads, where entrepreneurs and investors connect. How are you today, David?
I'm doing great, David. It's a wonderful day in Southern California. Kind of matches our attitude. We have a great guest today. I've got a little announcement to make, and maybe you do too. Mine is I have a brand new book that was published last week. It's available on all the regular channels. Amazon actually printed the inside in color, which I've never seen before. And so I would recommend you get this through Amazon, and I have an author's page as well. So that's my news for the week, David. How about you?
Well, we continue to make some progress on the strategic affiliate front. I have a couple in the process for TCA as we build up our strategic affiliate group that supplements the networks that we have currently within TCA as members. And that's great because that brings us better deal flow and gives us an ability to share and even jointly participate on due diligence teams. And that's a biggie, so we can get the right expertise at the right time.
Very good. Look forward to another new affiliate. You do very well with that. Let's bring our guest on, and we have some great questions to ask a great guest.
Yeah, speaking about great, smart, expert people, I've known Paul Quadros. Paul is the former chair of Band of Angels and chair of the Life Sciences Special Interest Group at Band of Angels. And I met Paul several years ago through this concept that we put together called Medical Mondays, which started with 6 people and now has like 60 people participating, including some hospitals. How are you, Paul? Good to see you.
Thank you. I'm great.
And it's good to see that you were and are very active in Band of Angels. I knew Ian, and so this is something for me to have you as a guest for us.
I've known Ian well before I joined the band, and I knew Hans pretty well too, who unfortunately passed away. But
yes,
so I've had sort of interactions with the band well before I became a member. But I've now been a member for 20 years, so it's been a while.
Well, we at ACA have a Hans Severance Award, the most important angel investor in the country each year. And we have a Louis Villalobos Award.
And I met Louis, who unfortunately we lost so young. And so I've been sort of in the angel orbit for quite a long time and had a chance to meet some of the real pioneers.
Yeah, Louis was an old friend, and I was the one of the first inductees into the Tech Coast Angels. And then Louis and I partnered in PR and other things, but he was a great mathematician. Lots of things to talk about, lots of stories. But let's get back to you, David.
Yeah, let me kick it off if I can. So, Paul, tell us, how did you end up focusing on life sciences investing? And as I look behind your shoulder, I'm seeing all these drugs on the shelf, or at least that's what it looks like to me.
Well, what's on the shelf are, back in the days when we used to print prospectuses, the printers would encapsulate them into plastic so that those of us who were involved in a particular deal would have sort of a keepsake. And that's what those are. So there are some, maybe 40, a little over 40 of those. Most of them are financing. Some of them are M&A deals. Some of them are, tombstones out of the Wall Street Journal. And it goes back all the way from the beginning of my career, which has really been finance-based. And how I got involved with life science is kind of interesting. I joined a venture fund in Silicon Valley in 1985, and it was a relatively new venture fund, and the real focus was on software. And shortly after I joined, we made our first investment in a life science company. And we had some real deep software expertise there and some expertise in some other technologies, but no one knew anything about life science, including me. But it was sort of a level playing field. So I just gravitated towards that because I was never going to catch up on these other technologies, and this was new to everybody. And so that was in 1985. And so for 40 years now, I've been initially a venture investor in life science, an entrepreneur in life science, and then more recently an angel in life science. But it's interesting because I'm able to kind of bring to our entrepreneurs a perspective from all angles. I've been a venture investor, been an angel, been an entrepreneur, had taken companies public. So I've been through the whole cycle of things, and so I can, I've been on 20 some life science boards, so I can just give them a lot of insight. It's just experience with some great ups and some big downs, and and so it's just helpful to have that breadth of experience to help these people, typically young, often not very experienced in the business world, and certainly not very experienced in the startup world, just to be helpful.
So many of these companies have to go through FDA clearance of either de novo or 501k sometimes. And you have experience in doing that?
Well, I've been involved both as an entrepreneur, as an investor in lots of companies that have been through the FDA. I'd say most all of them have had to go through the FDA to just one path or another. Some easier, some quite long. My view is that that's a real specialized area of expertise. And when the companies get to the point where they're starting to have or proposing to have conversations with the FDA, that they get some real expert help.
So, Paul, what makes life science deals fundamentally different than any of the other deals from an investor perspective? I mean, Dave raised the issue of the FDA, so we have the clearance and the regulatory, but what else is there in these deals that make it so unique and special? And what are the different categories of life sciences?
Well, I think the thing that makes them unique is that they typically have a long path to revenue. And that tends to be an area that troubles many investors. And what I always share with people is that, yes, they do at times have a very long path to revenue. But the flip side of that is that the lives of the products can be extraordinarily long. So while there are a lot of software and other tech companies that can get to market very quickly, their competitors can get to market very quickly as well. And it's not uncommon in the life science space, either on the biotech side or the device side, to have a product that has a really strong life for 10, 15, 20 years. And I'll give you the ultimate example. Tom Foley, who's a very sort of renowned inventor, physician, surgeon, who I know reasonably well. Tom invented a catheter when he was in medical school. The Foley catheter. Okay, that's been a product for 70 years.
Wow.
So, so the difference is, short product cycles, quick to revenue, long march to product commercialization, but very long product cycles, typically at much higher margins and valued higher by strategics because of these long product lives, often, helped by deep patent portfolios. And so, it's a very different investing space than on the tech side.
Can understand that. So let's talk about that. When you're evaluating a deal, and this is the difficulty of life science deals, are you looking more at the science or at the team? How do you handle that?
I kind of think of it as, we invest in horses and jockeys. And so the horses are the IP, the market, the potential margins there, the product cycle. Could that product in the hands of somebody with deep marketing and other, resources really make this something significant? And so kind of that's our horse. But the reality is that all startups are challenging. I've yet to meet one that didn't have a life-threatening event in its first few years.
Yep.
And if you don't have a really solid team, you just never get the chance to take it to the point where it is an attractive company to acquire or build and go public or, whatever. But you improve your chances of having a successful outcome if you have a really novel concept of the product. It has good intellectual property, and you have a team of people, sometimes really experienced, sometimes really novices, but have the energy and the intelligence to know what they don't know, and to execute in a manner that shows the community, the medical community, that this is a product that's that has a lot of value, and that practitioners or patients and investors perceive as something important.
So I've got a question that's been bugging me forever about life science deals. You hear that whatever the deal is can cure cancer, and all of a sudden you're excited about it without knowing enough about the detail. So as you look at all of these deals that come around, how do you evaluate them before you've had a chance to even look at management?
Yeah, well, I guess that, over time, you get a certain level of experience. And I feel pretty confident in evaluating companies sort of on two dimensions. Kind of a first level dimension about the technology and the product. And is it something that the market would really like to see into the market and commercialized? And I, have, I think, grown to have a better insight to the people. But the reality is that you really need to reach out to expert help, whether it's within your investment community or whatever, to do a deeper dive on both the technology and the IP, because those are things that require people with really very specialized expertise to tell you just how valuable those are. Because here's the reality. If you make a new invention in life science, and you start to get some traction with it, even in clinical trials, people in that industry who have many more resources than you do will try to steal it, unless you have it protected. And so that's just an important part of building one of these companies, is to have the right kind of intellectual property and the right kind of engineering and technical support to create something that's really novel. And so kind of that's my approach.
Yeah, so I have an interesting, let me take the other side of the coin. We talk about the things you look for. Tell me about the biggest red flags. If you hear this, or if you see this, you will just basically retrench. You'll stay away.
Yeah, probably the biggest one are people who think they have all the answers. They don't need a lot of coaching. They don't need a lot of help. They know all the answers, and the reality is that no management team in any startup knows all the answers. And so what I like to see among the management teams are people who will listen, people who are coachable, people who understand, who know what they don't know, and look and reach out to people to fill in the gaps. I mean, every management team is, from in the early stages, is too small, right? I mean, and everybody's wearing lots of hats, and nobody has the expertise to wear all those hats well. So, you have to reach out to other people to fill in those gaps. And I think people that have a realistic view of that and have the ability to incorporate into their team people with, expertise that they need, that they don't have. So, to me, that is an important kind of mindset that I look for. The other thing, for putting on our investor hats, people have to be likable, and these investments that we make in these early stage companies, these are investments that we have for 3, 4, 5 years, and you just have to want to continue to be engaged with these people for a long period of time. So one of the things that I tell entrepreneurs that I'm helping is, first and foremost, to get somebody to invest in your company. they have to like you. They might, even if you have the next, Genentech, they have to like you. And
Yeah.
so kind of get your head around that in terms of how you deal and interact with people who are investors or the angel groups or whatever. But you have to be likable.
Coachable. I've just got to underline your statement about that. Absolutely.
Got
And
to be
flexible at the same time. That's one of the things that I think in most technology things, we have a pivot with every company. Do we have pivots we talk about in life science as well?
Yeah, we have pivots. I would say that, yeah, we have pivots. They're fairly common, but probably not as common as they are in tech, but they're fairly common. I can think of a couple that we just have rolled through the band where I've been involved with the due diligence and all. And in several of those companies, they started in one part of the anatomy, but ended up in another because they found that their invention really had a higher value or a better entry point into the market dealing with some other, part of the anatomy. And so, yeah, I think you always have to be, always have to be aware of that and the pivot. And I've had numerous lessons on the value of know your customer, to really know your customer. I was a co-founder and the chairman of Cardiac Science, which made the first AED. And everybody in the company was from the medical device side. So here we have the very first AED, which as an industry has saved tens of thousands of lives. And we all had some experience in selling to physicians and hospitals. But that's not who buys AEDs. AEDs are bought by schools and airports and universities and first responder, whatever. But they aren't bought. And hospitals, they have crash carts and all that. So it was a great example of a truly breakthrough technology, which became universal. I mean, you can't go anywhere these days where there's not an AED on the wall. And the company went public. Eventually, it was sold to Zoll, but many years after I was gone. But we really didn't understand our customer from the beginning. And had we done it, we had first mover advantage, and we lost at least a year of that because we really didn't understand our customer. And that was just a great lesson for me, a great and painful lesson for me. Know your customer. So, if you have a life science product, who's your customer? Is it a hospital? Is it a particular kind of physician? Is it a particular kind of patient? How much do you know about that? How much do you know about how they are currently being treated? How this fits into the workflow or disrupts it in a way that's just much more advantageous for the patient and the provider, so know your customer. I think that's a big part of having a successful startup, and also an important part of how you can pitch to investors who then understand that you really understand your business and that you could have a successful ride.
Great story. Mm-hmm.
Now, when you look at a life sciences deal, and when we're talking life science, I'm talking medical device, talking about therapeutics, wellness, it's a whole variety of things. How do you think up front about an exit path when there can be multiple exit paths?
Yeah.
So what do you look like, and what do you suggest other investors look like? I'm trying to get to the risk levels that you are trying to put a box around.
Well, I'm less knowledgeable about wellness than I am about devices and therapeutics, or even diagnostics. So those I kind of understand, but wellness, it kind of doesn't really fit my model. So,
all right, so take a look at the other one.
Yeah.
Right.
So I mean, I think in the 40 years that I've been doing this, one of the things that I've seen that's been pretty dramatic is that the the big companies, particularly on the device side, the big companies have basically left the R&D world. They have made a decision that what they're really good at is sales and marketing, value engineering, regulatory and compliance, and they're just not really good at inventing. And so they're constantly on the lookout for the next new the next new big thing. And that's when we see them and they see us. And so I think when you're, working on a startup, it's important to think about who could buy it and how you might fit into their, into their company. But the beneficial thing is that all of these big companies are just really active in the acquisition space because they don't do their own inventing anymore. And a big part of that is that it's really hard for big companies to be inventors because there just tends to be a sort of an institutional bias against risk. So they're willing to pay significant premiums if you can take a product into humans and get some human data. So if it's a device that you've done 10 or 20 patients and it shows your device works, it works in humans, it solves the problem that it's trying to solve. On the biotech side, it's very beneficial to at least have safety data. It's been in humans, it's safe to use, and some measure of efficacy, so that they can tell that whatever it is that you're doing is having a fundamental change that could change the outcome of that patient and the disease that they have. So, that's what I look for. But in all of these big companies just have big teams of M&A people that are out there looking for deals.
I assume that one of the best things that you can add as an individual who's been around are relationships with some of these people who are in the acquisition mode of the bigger companies.
Yeah, the challenge is that they turn over pretty quickly. So, part of it is that these big companies take people that they're grooming to be operating executives of some particular kind of industry, and they'll turf them over to be in M&A for a couple of years to get a sense of what's on the horizon and what's new, and then they'll end up back in an operating role. And so it's hard to stay on top of all of that. And there are investment bankers who that's their world, right? And that's their job. And sometimes it makes sense to hire one just because they know who all the players are. Fortunately, at the band, we have people from the industry who are band members and people who were in the industry but still have good relationships. And so usually we're able to reach out and at least touch a few of those people for any particular company in a particular sector and get some early indications of whether or not this is something that looks like it's on the right path for them or not, and get some institutional feedback from those folks about the potential value of the company to them.
So unfortunately, we're going to run out of time, but I wanted to give you before we go to Dave for closing remarks and the summary, I want to give you one last shot at telling entrepreneurs a piece of great information that's going to help them get the right funding. And what one thing would you tell the investors to look at when they invest in life sciences?
Okay. Well, for entrepreneurs, I think the one thing, besides being likable, I think the one thing that I would say is that slide decks on their own, unnarrated, that just are put on a website for people to look at, are a really poor way to communicate what your company is about on a standalone basis. So add to that a 2 to 4 page executive narrative summary that says, here's what we do, here's what we're about, here's our competitive advantage, here's our moat, here's our IP. Give me some context about what your whole company is and what your vision is. And then when I go through the slides, I can sort of make the slides connect with the narrative that I just read. So that's my one big piece of advice for entrepreneurs. In terms of investors, the thing that sort of hits me always at the very beginning is just the interaction with the team. You know, whether it's the CEO or more or whatever, just how they talk to me about their company and the ease of that conversation. You know, how easy does that really flow? When I ask a question, do I get a candid answer? And is it all in a way where they appreciate that I'm spending some time to talk to them and they sort of respect that and they are open and candid and honest about what they know and what they don't know. So it's really that communication thing that for me really, you know, after I have my first hour one-on-one on Zoom or an in-person meeting, if they're close to me, at that point, I know whether I'd like to keep talking or I'm done.
Right.
Some of us take a lot less than an hour to come to that conclusion, but I gotcha. So Paul, it's been great having you. And I certainly got that it was 1985 when you first got involved with a life science venture capital company. And the toys behind you that we saw that we talked about, you said you had something like 40 of them, and I was impressed. So here's a person with experience, everybody. I hope you've listened to what Paul had to say. David, take it away.
Yeah, great to see you, Paul. See you on Medical Monday. We'll see what the next great late invention, you know, in helping people with longevity and cure their ills are taking place. And I really appreciate your time with your words of wisdom to everybody, both entrepreneurs and to investors. And on behalf of Dave Burkus and myself, we'll see you next time.